Okay, so all I have to say is that the Earth is not 6,000 years old. I'm sorry, I rest my case.
Well, I agree with you. I don't think it's thousands of years old.
Thank you. We can all go home now, it seems.
Well, why do you raise this question in
plain
particular?
and simple, modern science has sufficiently destroyed any need for God. Any explanation that was once explained by God is no longer necessary. Science has done the job of explaining everything. And if it hasn't, it sure will one day.
So, what scientific discovery are you referencing
for example,
that
biology
proved that God didn't exist?
Well, evolution is obviously true. It's held by 95% of all the scientific community. You know that.
How does it prove that God doesn't exist?
Well, because we got here by evolutionary processes. Now we weren't created.
So you're speaking of the Darwinian thesis, right?
Right.
Do you know that's a thesis about speciation?
Yes.
That's not talking about the origin of life. That's a separate science.
Well, we did come about through evolution, and so that does refer to the origin of life.
No, it doesn't. That's a separate science. It's called origin science. So, strictly speaking, Darwinian evolution deals with speciation. So, origin of species. So, it deals with how one form of life came to diversify. But it doesn't say anything about how we got the first life in the first place. That's a separate science.
Well, that's
It's
just
called
one
origin
example.
science.
There's whether it's biology or origins of life that you like to call it, or
Mhm.
or the absurdity of miracles. That's riddled in Scripture. There's obviously no miracles.
So how has science disproven miracles?
Well, because you cannot. Well, science shows that every time you put water into a test tube, it remains water, not wine.
Okay. So every time in the past that we've, put water in a test tube, it's stayed water, right?
It'll also happen on Wednesday.
Okay. So how many cups of water has there been in the whole history of the earth? Through humans drinking water and what have you? How many cups of water have
I
there
haven't done research in that area. It's not my specialty.
been? Okay.
But I imagine plenty.
Okay, I'm just wondering because if you want to make a generalization such that, every single cup of water that has ever existed on the earth in the hands of every human being has stayed water, you would have to know every single cup. You would have to test every single cup of water of every human being.
Well, how
throughout
many
the
cups
history
of
the
water
earth.
have you held that turned into
Well,
wine?
I haven't, but my experience, people's experience can be different from mine. So let's say we have someone in a certain tribe, in a certain part of the world, and we tell them, you know what, water can become solid. And they laugh at us. They're like, not in my experience. You gotta be kidding me. Rocks are solid,
Well,
trees
it's
are
still
solid.
water.
Well,
It's
no,
just
the
a
point is
different form.
the point is their experience doesn't bear on the truth necessarily. Our experience is limited, So just because water has stayed water for me doesn't necessarily mean that it stays water for everybody else. And my question is still valid. Can you give me the scientific journal and the experiment that has proven that God doesn't exist?
Can you give me the scientific journal that has proven that he does exist?
Well, I think there's good scientific evidence that he does exist. There have been articles about it. People that are arguing God's existence from science. So, for example, we have people from Oxford University. We have people from Notre Dame University, USC. We have a lot of top philosophers that think that science actually bears on the side of the theist or the believer in God. So it's definitely not a moot question. There's definitely dialogue taking place. Now, whether or not you believe it, that depends if you've read the material and what you judge on it. But the debate is taking place. It's not a closed question.
Right, but as you know, whatever takes place in the scientific community and questions there, those are scientific truths and facts that we deal with. And whatever takes place in the religious community, that's up to you. But these things don't overlap in any way.
I would love to know what scientific discoveries do you think I as a Christian can't believe?
Well, evolution.
Well, like I said, evolution deals with speciation.
Sure.
And I think that even though I'm not an evolutionist, I think that the beginning chapters of Genesis might allow for some form of theistic evolution. That is an evolution guided by God, not a purely materialistic, naturalistic evolution. But I do think the beginning chapters of Genesis do allow for that, even though I'm not an evolutionist. And there are good Christians that hold that view as well.
Okay, well, bottom line...
So can you name anything other than evolution? Because I honestly have no problem with evolution.
Well, bottom line is, no matter how much evidence I give you, you'll still take it on blind faith. You'll read scripture and believe it just because on faith, which is okay. You can do that if you like. I stick with the sciences, just like politics has their own set of facts. Well, science has their own set of facts, and religion has its own set of facts.
Okay. So, let me get this straight. You can't name any scientific discovery that I, as a Christian, can't accept, right? You named evolution, and I said I have personally no big deals with that. So there's really, because for you to say there's a conflict between science and faith, you have to name some scientific discovery
well, like
that
the sun staying still for 7 days. It's just a sort of an absurdity of you religious folks.
Okay, why?
Because the last time I checked, the sun did not stay still for 7 days.
So how many revolutions of the sun have you personally,
Again, this is not my area of specialty. I haven't researched that. But plenty, I assume.
See, the problem is you like to make generalizations, but you're not there at every instance. You want to say every cup of water in the history of humankind has stayed water, but you haven't checked every cup of water in the history of humankind.
Well,
you want to say that every revolution of the sun has been exactly like it is that we picture now, but you haven't seen every revolution of the sun. You haven't experienced it. How do you make these generalizations when your experience is so limited?
Well, we go into a room full of 20 good-looking kids from Laguna Beach, and we were to make the same comment that you did. And I would make the same comment about water and wine and sun staying still. Which do you think they would believe?
It depends, because, for example, we didn't always have a sun, and we won't always have a sun. It's not necessary, right? The scientist in talking about eschatology, talking about the end of the world, scientists have come to two different kind of models of what's going to happen. So either there's not enough gravity in the universe to keep it from expanding, so it's going to expand forever. This is called a cold death, okay? Or there is enough mass in the universe to contract it eventually, because the universe right now is expanding, right? And so if it doesn't have enough mass, keep on going, keep on going, keep on going. If it does have enough mass, it's going to start to close in on itself, and that's called a hot death, okay? So these are two views of the end times, as it were, by scientists, okay? My point is, will the sun revolve? Will the Earth revolve around the sun at that point? No, there's not going to be an Earth. There's not going to be a sun, right? You seem to say that there's this kind of mechanistic have to be, going on with nature, but it doesn't have to be. We know the sun's not always going to be here. The Earth's not always going to be here, and it wasn't always here. There was a creation point of the sun. There was a creation point of the Earth, right? My view is just change is possible, and we shouldn't limit what we see in the world and force and impose our view on it. There's a lot more that's possible that we didn't think was possible. I think my view is more open-minded.
Isn't your view just everything is blind faith? You just take everything on faith. Don't you Christians do that?
Well, I think some Christians do, but I don't think I do. So it may be the case that some Christians...
But faith and thinking don't go together. Faith is just a thing that you do when you can't think anymore.
Okay. Well, yeah, you're right. Some people take faith as a covering a gap in knowledge.
Right. As Mark Twain said, faith is believing in something you know ain't true.
Okay. Yeah. So that's the view of some people. I wouldn't hold that view. What I take faith to be is the same definition as I would use faith for anything else. So let's say I have faith that my friend will pick me up tomorrow morning, right? Obviously, I don't mean blind faith, right? The notion there is trust. I trust my friend to pick me up in the morning. Why? Because he's shown himself to be reliable, So that's the faith that I'm using. I think if God didn't answer prayers, I wouldn't, and he didn't show himself, he didn't reveal himself, and he didn't leave evidence, I probably wouldn't be a Christian. So my faith is grounded in fact.